From a man coming off his 2-year suspension from mixed martial arts due to the Nevada Athletic Commission sanctioning him for taking omega-3 fatty acid pills for brain health, this is the Daniel Natal Show. Most schools today teach that America is a propositional country. What is a propositional country? In terms of world history, this is a new thing. It means a country not based on a people, but based on an idea. This concept is no older than the 20th century when the Soviet Union based itself on the idea of communism. The problem with this notion is that America was not founded in the 20th century. It was founded in 1776. The founding fathers never heard of a propositional country. They had no notion of founding America on anything other than its people, the American people. In fact, the form of government they chose was an allusion to the people, a republic. It literally means the people's thing in Latin. Lincoln would later say that America was a nation of the people, by the people, and for the people. The people were central to its establishment. Thomas Jefferson made the same point to Supreme Court Justice John Marshall, criticizing his belief that the people should be cut out of all decision-making. Jefferson pointed out what we just said, that a republic has an etymology which means the people's thing. If you have a government that decouples from the people, it's no longer a republic. It's a contradiction in terms. Yet since the 20th century, we've been given the new version of America, America 2.0, where we're a nation without a people. We're a nation based on an idea, they said, like the old Soviet Union. Such a country is called, as we alluded to at the outset, a propositional country, and it is an entirely new fabrication of the 20th century. The Founding Fathers would have been baffled had you suggested that America was a country without a people, a nation of immigrants, based only on an idea. What of course really happened was mass migration. New groups and ideas flooded into the United States. Immigrants from the Soviet Union started reusing talking points from there and projecting them onto America, just like the term melting pot. How many people are aware that this is actually from the Austrian Empire? It's what it called itself before it balkanized and collapsed. The Habsburg emperors ruled over Germans, Slovenes, Hungarians, Italians, Serbians, Poles, and so forth. One of the ways they tried to brand their empire was by calling it the melting pot. It was no coincidence that new immigrant groups from the Austrian Empire reused that term when they entered America and repurposed the hand-me-down phrase for the United States, terraforming their adopted country so that a new narrative could be established. Namely, that America wasn't created for its own people, but existed solely as a support system for foreigners. The job of traditional Americans was to make sure that foreigners had a better life. A perfect symbol for this inversion can be seen in the Statue of Liberty. It was originally given to America as a gift from the people of France to celebrate the centennial of the country and to honor the citizens of the United States. Only much later was the poem of a socialist added to the statue's base, where we were now told that the statue celebrated migrants fleeing Russia. This would have come as some shock to the man who made the Statue of Liberty, who had no intention of celebrating migrants from Eastern Europe. And in fact, the poem wasn't even written with the Statue of Liberty in mind. It was written in a completely different context by Emma Lazarus, celebrating a different people. In a Slate magazine article of Emma Lazarus's poem, they point to the fact that the poem was not written for the Statue of Liberty, nor was it written for America or the American people. It was written earlier, according to her biographer Esther Shore, who said, "She was made aware of the refugee crisis of Jews fleeing pogroms in Russia by people who were working with her at the American Hebrew magazine. She was asked to go visit the refugees early on at the Schiff Refuge, a camp on Ward's Island. She wrote an amazing muckraking piece of journalism about the conditions of the refuge. And it was very effective, because within a few days, a cannery had offered jobs to these people. She knew how to make a difference. She knew how to make an impact." Miss Lazarus wrote her poem in 1883, 2 years before France made a gift of the Statue of Liberty to America, so it was not written for that event, nor was it even written to celebrate the American people. So the symbol of the Statue of Liberty was prized away from Americans and repurposed. The imagery was subverted, and the American people were essentially told that a gift meant for them would be regifted to another people, foreigners fleeing from Europe. Imagine moving to Egypt and telling the Egyptian people that the pyramids were not theirs, but stood as a symbol for you. Imagine the arrogance, the narcissism, the sociopathic indifference to the people whose heritage and bequest you were stealing. Emma Lazarus was essentially a glorified porch pirate, seeing an Amazon.com parcel on someone else's doorstep and stealing it for herself. Because let's repeat, Bertoldi did not create the Statue of Liberty for migrants fleeing Russia. France gave it as a gift to Americans, and Americans alone, to celebrate their centennial. So with all due respect to Emma Lazarus, America was founded for the American people. It was never designed as a mere support system for migrants. And that paradigm shift in how we see America is a very dangerous one indeed. Why? Because it's the revisionist remaking of America to America 2.0, with its nation of immigrants branding, its secondhand melting pot narrative, which is a foreign import. It's just as foreign as the Soviet-style propositional country narrative that was grafted onto the older America. What's pernicious about these systems is that they decouple a people from their government. The populace is told that they don't matter, and they only exist to serve another people. As Thomas Jefferson said to Chief Justice John Marshall around 1804, a republic that silences its own people is a contradiction in terms. Jefferson, as we alluded to earlier, wanted the people to have the power in America, whereas John Marshall was more of a top-down monarchy fanboy. His entire career was dedicated to disempowering ordinary people so that the rich and powerful could rule undisturbed. This offended Jefferson. Marshall responded that ordinary people were too unsophisticated and lacked the self-control to rule, whereupon Jefferson said that that was why they had to be educated up to that level. But the answer, he said, was not in silencing them. This makes no sense in a republic, a form of government whose etymology in Latin comes from res publica, which means the people's thing. To silence the people and what's supposed to be the people's thing is a paradox, Jefferson said. It's like modern Democrats claiming to love democracy, yet they say that the greatest danger to democracy is populism. Well, what is populism? It comes from the Latin word populus, the people. It literally means the people's rule. Listen to Australian commentator Joel Davis cite this contradiction in liberalism.
And another aspect of this dynamism of liberalism is that they are willing, on the one hand, they do the punch a Nazi bit in the West. That's the entire liberal managerial class's opinion, that you should use violence to silence what they call Nazis in the West, while they rationalize and make excuses for giving javelin launchers to what appear to be ostensible Ukrainian or boundarous ultranationalists. So what do you make of all that? How do we interpret this?
Yeah, well, I think if you really want to zone back, you want to talk about liberalism in general, I think Carl Schmitt's essay, The Crisis of Parliamentary Democracy, is perhaps his most underrated work. Often people talk about, the more famous texts like Political Theology or Concept of the Political. But I found that text, Crisis of Parliamentary Democracy, to be in many ways more relevant, I think, to our time. And that's because basically what he identifies is what he sees as a fundamental contradiction between democracy and liberalism, which is obviously very counterintuitive to how most people think. Most people think, they equate the two things. And now, basically China's not a democracy, Russia's not a democracy, Iran's not a democracy, etc., because they're not liberal. And this seems to be, according to Freedom House or the Atlantic Council or CNN, there is no difference between liberalism and democracy. But actually, according to the Atlantic Council, to bring them up, also the biggest threat to liberalism is apparently something called populism, which sounds an awful lot like democracy to me.
The Founding Fathers very explicitly created a country of the people, by the people, and for the people. At the time in 1776, it was the only republic on earth, literally the only government dedicated to the people's thing. But now revisionists are telling us that that's a lie, that America was not in fact created for an American people, but instead, like the Soviet Union, it's a propositional country based on an idea, not a people. When you start saying that an American people don't exist, it has consequences. One of these is in government. The whole point of government is as a support system for a people. Once you start promoting a narrative that there is no American people, then why are those representatives even there? Who are they supposed to represent if they're constantly told that America is no longer a nation of the people, by the people, and for the people, but is instead now a nation based on an idea, decoupled from a people? Now, with the disappearance of an American people, their duty shifts to padding their own pockets. You can't have a government if you don't have a people. It's that simple. It's like expecting a saddle without a horse. So long story short, don't blame the self-serving politician for padding his own pockets. Why else did you send him to Washington? To represent an American people who you say in the very next breath don't even exist? Words have meanings. If you believe that we're a republic, then you believe that our form of government is the people's thing, an assertion that makes no sense if there is no American people. If you keep promoting the propositional nation canard, then what you're unintentionally doing is creating an incubator for corruption in Washington for a political class who is already alienated from the populace over whom they rule. If they no longer identify with the people, why would you expect them to do anything else than pad their own pockets? The John Birch Society provides a national program designed to counter the big government agenda and to restore our rights. Standing for constitutional freedoms for more than 60 years, the John Birch Society has been the force that protects and restores American liberty and independence. Check them out at jbs.org.